Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Gotham, Supergirl, as well as Lucifer. So first of all, I'm going to say this really quickly because I don't actually bring this up that often. If you've ever listening to these and I happen to be talking about a show that you don't really care about, for example, say like, oh, you're here because you're curious about what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, but you don't care about Gotham or Lucifer. Well, if you look in the description, I'll have the time slots of when everything starts. Like, it's like, okay, at blah, blah, blah time is when I started talking about Supergirl. Just something to kind of keep in mind. I don't really bring that up that often, but I figured I might as well start doing that for, especially because, a lot of these I talk about multiple shows. So, because I know not everyone's going to be into everything I'm into. Definitely know not a lot of people like Gotham. I do, so, just kind of giving you that option of, that's really all you care about. So, just want to kind of get out the bat. But anyway, moving on. First thing we're talking about this episode is Gotham. So, two things I found out in this episode that I feel like such an idiot for not realizing. One, Tabitha. I don't know why it took me to now to kind of realize that she's kind of like a Catwoman representation. What I mean is, like, obviously we have Selena Kyle in the show, but it's like when you look at her, she's very Catwoman. Like, I saw the whip, and then I saw her on a bike with kind of the goggles, and it's like, how did I not realize that before? Like, how did it just now click in my head that, like, oh yeah, she's Catwoman. Like, she's Catwoman-like. Like, maybe, eventually down the road, maybe she possibly trained Selena to be more like her, or whatever, because Selena's always looking for, like I brought it up before, Selena's always kind of following someone else's lead, so who's to say she won't kind of end up training under Tabitha. But that was just kind of interesting to me. I never realized that till now. The whip and everything, her like fighting skills and everything, it's like, it just clicked in my brain seeing her drive off on that motorcycle at the end of the episode. But I'll get to that a little bit later on. And the other thing, realizing that Victor, who works with Penguin, the bald dude, who was originally working with Falcone, right? That's actually Victor Saz. Now, I don't know whether they've actually mentioned his name before and I just didn't realize it. I'm not that well informed on, DC stuff, especially Batman villains. But finding out who he was, I was like, Zaz. He just called him Zaz. Wait, Victor Zaz? And it clicked in my head. I was like, once again, another one of those villains, just like the Mad Hatter. It's like, I know him because of Batman Asylum, Arkham Asylum. And I think he has a part to play in Arkham City too, but nonetheless, it's like he's a serial killer that basically wasn't like he like cuts into himself for every victim he kills. And so like it never clicked in my head. Like maybe they did say his name before, but even if they had, like maybe at the time I didn't really know who Victor Zsasz was, or I just didn't it just didn't click in my brain. But this episode it did. I was like, how did I not realize that? That's kind of interesting. Just kind of two major notes. Some stuff that went down in this episode. Obviously, we had Lee come in the gym and be like, yeah, so my fiance, you might read, in the papers about his name and stuff. He's like, oh, him being Falcone. And she's like, wait, you knew? He's like, yeah, people talk and everything. And she's like, oh, so do you have, basically like, oh, do you have a problem with that? He's like, I was kind of shocked at first, but it's like, when I realized, the fact is, it's your business. You're a fully grown woman. You can make your own decisions, so it's not my place to really say anything. We had our situation, yes, but, this is your life and it's not mine, so I really don't have any right saying anything about it, especially after everything. Because, especially after everything that's going on between them, he's not trying to ruin things between them. Like, they're at a good place and he kind of doesn't want to jeopardize that. You can tell that it hurts because you can see, like, because Lee was like, okay, so he's like, basically he was like, I meant what I said before. I wish you the best of luck and congratulations. And she's like, so is that all you have to say? And she's you could see that she wanted him to say more, and you can tell he wanted to say more. It's like, it's so obvious they still have feelings for each other. Even though Lee said, she told Falcone, she was like, yeah, there's no need to worry. I'm going to, my feelings with Jim are kind of settled. I'm marrying your son. It'll be all okay. But it's like, no, like, you can tell those feelings are, she still cares a lot about him, whether it's something I'm not sure she's willing to admit to herself because she's supposed to be moving on, yet she kind of finds herself, probably drawn back to Jim a little bit, just like Jim is kind of trying to move on at the same time, like kind of drawn back to her a little. Like, it's going to be interesting seeing how things progress further. Like, I already knew, like, I always knew, like, I was like, it's going to be interesting, especially with this current situation. I kind of wasn't expecting the situation to kind of be extremely complicated, because it's like, she's got a new fiance, Jim's got a new girl in his life. At first, it seems like, oh, everything's just kind of like, nah, we're not going further, like, Jim and Valerie. It's just kind of like, oh, no, why ruin a good thing? We're having fun while kind of complicate things. Kind of brought that up before. We kind of see it extenuating a little bit more because Valerie's asking about the Alice's blood. Jim's not willing to answer the question because it's like, basically asking her, will there be a possibility of her dividing herself? Like once you're with me, kind of like leave the reporter at the door and you're just simply Valerie. But she's like, no, I can't do that. It's like, could you do that as a cop? And Jim kind of sadly thinks like, well, maybe if I did, things would have worked out a lot differently for him. But at the end of the episode, it seems like something might be happening between them, especially because the whole conversation he had with Bruce earlier in the episode, when he was talking about for Bruce to tell Selena how he really feels, and then, Bruce kind of turned it back on him. It's like, he's like, oh, I think that boat's already set. He's not like, no, I'm not talking about Lee. I'm talking about the new lady in your life. He's like, kind of, Bruce, like, Gordon's kind of like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, when I was at your place, I saw that there was lipstick on one of your cups. And I was like, wow, you're quite the detective. Look, it's so interesting, like, seeing, like, it was just like a little thing, but, just showing that, hey, those observation skills are getting heightened. I mean, still, I know it's a very long hop and a skip away from becoming, the greatest detective he's destined to become, but still, nevertheless, I just really like that a lot. That he's like, oh, I'm turning into quite the detective, aren't you? So I was like, I don't know. That, like I said, it just got me really giddy. But he did end up telling Selena how he felt, and I was happy. Like, I want those two to get together, not just because I know Batman and Catwoman's history, just kind of like that flirtatious, like, relationship they have, and just kind of like that back and forth, good and evil type of relationship that they have. It's not even just that, it's just as these characters, it's like they're so totally into each other, it's just things just kind of get in the way, and he's just kind of like, he finally fessed up his feelings to her, and then they kissed, and then he was just like, okay, so you do have feelings for me? I'm confused. She's like, good, and walks away. So I was like, nevertheless, I'd call that a win. I mean, you're still not really sure where she stands, but I mean, she kissed you. That's a win. So that was good. And also in this episode we had, because it was an episode where Bruce hired Jim to kind of look for Ivy. They got on a trail of Ivy because they found her, the guy that she attacked, which apparently I thought she killed him. No, she didn't. Apparently she just knocked him out. I mean, he was bleeding a lot, but apparently he was okay because he gave the report about like, oh, it was some girl that showed up being in her mid-20s. Like, they still haven't pieced it together what happened to her. But they did end up running, more specifically, Selena kind of ran into her at the mayor party for Penguin, and she kind of stopped Selena and was like, oh, it's like, I guess she was kind of like, I never realized how short you were and stuff like that. Basically telling Selena, go off and keep stealing. Like, because of the way she looks now, she's able to kind of seduce men and kind of, I guess, she doesn't have to fight for scraps like she used to. So she kind of it seems like almost like she's kind of feeling like she's above Selena now, because Selena was always there protecting her. So now it's kind of like, oh, I'm better than you, Selena. Oh, you don't recognize it's me. It's okay. Eventually it'll dawn on you. But you can see Selena, she's just like, she even asked Bruce, like, does she look familiar to you? She's like, because you can tell, like, something's just not right. Like, she realizes, like, she seems familiar. And it's like, she doesn't realize that's Ivy. I mean, granted, you wouldn't really know that that's her, I mean, I don't think you would naturally draw the conclusion that's like, oh yeah, that guy touched her, so she aged, but because he didn't hold her for an extremely long period of time, she ended up not aging super fast and dying like everyone else. And like I said, I'm going back to that. Maybe it makes you wonder, will the effects be temporary because he didn't kill her, that eventually she will kind of revert back to her kid form, or is it just because, like, whatever happens to her later on when she gets her powers and everything becomes poison ivy, maybe that slows, like, becoming part plant might slow down her aging and stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe that's one way around it. Like I said, this is me getting nitpicky about it. It's like I said, once again, bringing the comparison, it's like Smallville. It has its own continuity. Why get caught up on it? But you can still draw from your own Batman knowledge a little bit that I do have. So, Now, I mean, either way they could do it like that. I mean, that was just kind of interesting to me. Like that, it did seem like she was looking down on Selena, just kind of, it's like for once in her life, she's kind of the one in control. Like she's like she can do things in her own way. She doesn't have to rely on anyone else. She just has to rely on herself. So. Another thing I really liked in this episode was Nygma at well, first of all, just the whole Penguin situation in this episode, just him stepping up as mayor, kind of working at a soup kitchen, helping out, pass out some soup and stuff to what I can only assume are like the less fortunate and homeless people, giving them food, and it's just being a somewhat like all. It's weird. Like it's just you see Penguin kind of painted in this positive picture, basically having the Red Hood show up again, and they destroy the statue of his mom because he's wondering like how would his mom feel about him as he is now. But essentially that whole situation of it turning out, it's like, oh yeah, the one behind the Red Hoods was Butch the entire time. Because essentially, and it's something you kind of do forget, like, Butch only worked with Penguin originally because Penguin Butch was under his control. Basically, Tabitha had kind of whipped him into becoming Butch's errand boy. Like, Butch had basically been whipped into becoming, No, it was Victor that did it, right? It was like Victor that originally messed him up in the head and turned him into Penguin's lackey, kind of doing his bidding without second guessing. And if I remember correctly, Tabitha slash Gallivan kind of got that out of his system. Because for Butch, he's like, I was originally something, even though he was serving fish, at least he had like a top ranking position. He was a kind of like, but now he's nothing more than a lapdog. Because it's like, he was kind of content with his position because at the very least it meant he had something. But now that Nygma showed up, it's like he means nothing to Penguin. Now he's just kind of in the back of the scene with no real power. So the whole thing. And what I really like is the fact that the whole Red Hood situation, I was wondering what his ultimate goal was, but it was like, hey, I'm going to have you guys show up. Like, he probably didn't explain this to them. Well, not probably. He definitely didn't explain it to them that they were going to show up and he was going to kick their asses and, kind of get back on Penguin's good side. I love how he tried to twist it. Basically, like, oh, he knew that Penguin was closing in. He's like, yeah, knew it was going to happen like this eventually. Had to kind of escalate his plans. It ended up killing them all at once. And Penguin's like, oh, good job, Butch, and everything. He's like congratulating him and everything. He's like, yeah. But Nygma, being who he is, quick to not believe, is like, okay, I see you for your BS. And he comes up with that whole plan about, you know what? Oh no, I'm tired of being number two. Yes, I thank Penguin for everything he's done for me, but I'm the one who's going to run this show. And so basically, he manipulated Butch into kind of outing himself as the boss, because basically had him show up and used to go. I mean, initially Butch was kind of smart and turned him down, but then Tabitha kind of got used as bait, and so Ed kind of forced his hand, and then he went through with it. But it's like, nope, it was a fake gun. Well, it was fake bullets, blanks. I don't know why I didn't just say blanks. And it's just like, Nygma is very conniving. I really like that. It was just kind of like, because there was a part of my brain like, I'm not 100% sure. I feel like this is a setup, but I wasn't sure, because maybe that is what Nygma's ultimate goal is. Maybe he's trying to draw Penguin in with like, oh, sincerity, like, oh, I'm actually your friend, I'm the only person that really cares about you, and then stabs him in the back, because that's what he really wants, is power. I mean, someone like Nygma is very unpredictable. But I mean, when it's all said and done, he has drawn, Nygma and Penguin have grown even closer because of this whole thing. It's like, oh, you knew what was going to happen, like, you set the whole thing in motion, why don't you just tell me? And it's like, oh, Nygma's like, no, like, if I just told you, you would have outed, Butch, but no one in the city would have really appreciated you. No one would have been, everyone would think like, oh yeah, how could he not know that Butch was behind the whole Red Hoods? That they might look at it like, oh, the whole thing was a publicity stunt, kind of raises ratings and stuff like that. But it's like, by doing things that way, they kind of separated, they kind of erased any doubt that people think like, oh yeah, Penguin had anything to do with it. So that was kind of interesting. I do love the fact that Tabitha was willing to try. Well, I mean, we see it in the episode, series / here, that she busted him out of that, from the GCPD as they were transporting him, which I guess that's just kind of her still having feelings for him, because he was bent, because, Barbara and Tabitha had figured out like that he was behind it and everything, but they didn't rat him out. It's like, okay, you just owe us a favor. It's because this entire time, like, He's kind of the reason why she hasn't been killed by Penguin. Her playing a part in his mom dying and everything, and it always been Butch that had kind of kept Penguin at bay. And plus, I guess she felt like she kind of owed him, and I think legitimately feelings kind of play a part in, because there was a thing between them before Barbara kind of showed up in the picture, and I don't think those feelings have completely gone away. It's going to be very interesting seeing how things progress, like, because at first, the way Barbara was handling the situation when, like, Butch was kind of getting taken in, like, she kind of pulled Tabitha back, but then she was okay with Tabitha going off, she knew what Tabitha was going to do, so I guess all three of them are going to be working together in the future. I mean, Barbara's just kind of doing her own thing. I don't know whether she has ambitions to kind of run things the way Penguin does or not. Like, I mean, he's kind of going somewhat legitimate. It seems like that's the way Nygma kind of wants him to, at the very least, appear. It's like, you want to still do your evil villain gangster thing. It's like, fine, but just kind of legitimize it so you can do that stuff without reservation, without having to worry about how people might act. It's like, as long as you do your gangster thing kind of under the guise of mayor, you're kind of okay. I mean, that's how I'm interpreting that. So, I was about to talk about it earlier, but I kind of, trailed away from it. Nygma showing back up at the GCPD was like, I really like that, because he showed up and just everyone in the GCPD is quiet. He was technically home. It's the first time he's been back since he was arrested. So it was quite interesting. You had Barnes being like, yo, get the hell out of here. He's like, no, I'm the chief of staff. I'm acting as a liaison between the mayor's office, giving him any updates about this whole Red Hood situation. So that was kind of interesting. His conversation with Lucius like, yeah, try and, do something to harm me or Bruce again. I will find a way to end you. He's like, oh, you're not a violent man. He's like, no, I'm not. But who's to say I didn't, tamper with any bit of equipment around here because I knew you were going to be here? Who's to say I didn't tamper with something that I knew that you would touch, covered it in ricin or something that kind of poison you? But it's like, Nygma was, even at a point when he's about to look at the microscope, even he kind of backed up a little bit, looked at Lucius, kind of like, that's kind of interesting. Like, it was kind of interesting. And probably one of my favorite parts of the episode was the whole him and Lee situation, when Lee just punched him in the face. She's like, that's for Kristen. And she's like, what, you think I'm scared of you? My fiance is, his dad is, Carmine Falcone. And you kind of see Nygma kind of take a step back. She's like, I could just whisper your name and you're done. She's like, so tell the mayor that I am happy to help him in any way in the future, and kind of smiles. It's like, ooh, look at Lee being a badass. It kind of seems a little shitty kind of using your fiance's name like that, even though, he's kind of the legitimate side of the family, because, Carmine kind of kept Marco away from that stuff. So it's just kind of interesting. And then the final note of the episode, I'm going to talk about Barnes a little bit. Because I was wondering, I was like, okay, it seemed like it wasn't affecting him, but from what Lee's study kind of shows, is like they tested it on 3 rats. One went completely insane. They all kind of got enhanced kind of strength and stuff like that. 2 stayed pretty calm. The other one went crazy and killed the other ones. It's kind of like any disease that, like, certain diseases, like, they kind of wait in, they could be inactive for years inside of a person. So, you can see Barnes kind of worried about, he hasn't let anyone know about Alice's blood touching him. But what's really fascinating about it, like, we kind of see it at the end of the episode, is like, he doesn't need his crush anymore. It seems like he's better now. And we kind of see the blood kind of enhancing him a little bit, like his eyes kind of getting all veiny and stuff like that. Now, what I'm curious about is, because Alice had brought it up before, that her blood works in different ways depending on the person. So, very curious to see what that will all be about. I know I threw out that stupid theory last week, hypothesis, that it's like, oh, what if she's actually Alice on the inside or something like that? But it's like, I guess he recognized the moment her blood touched him, he was saying no because he realized what was happening to him. So I'm very curious to see how that will kind of play out, next time, like, will people, obviously people are probably going to notice immediately that he's not walking without a cane or whatever, but also just how will his attitude change, especially because he's like super enhanced and everything. And then final note we got to see it at the end of the episode was the Jervis, that basically he's kind of playing role play. Now this kind of ties into a little bit of the Mad Hatter that I know from like the Batman Arkham games, that the little bit of a profile, is that basically he's obsessed with Alice in Wonderland, and that basically my thought was, I didn't realize that she was actually his biological sister. What I was thinking is that she was basically someone he pretended was his sister just because he got it wrapped up in his head. And it seemed like that's kind of where his story's going now. With Alice actually dead, he's trying to find other women to kind of substitute for her, but I don't think any woman will ever be good enough. So eventually what he did to that lady, he just slit her throat. She's like, oh, that he killed you, my dear Alice. And she's like, but I'm not dead. He's like, oh, if only that were true. And then slit her throat. So obviously he's aiming for Jim. He's left the whole note written in her blood with James' name on it. But what I'm wondering is, like, will we see him kind of do that more and more in the future? Like, bringing in other women, kind of like, oh, be my Alice. Be the Alice that I lost. You're not my Alice. You can never be my Alice. And decides to kill them, like, once the fantasy's broken. Kind of like your typical, like, when you're profiling certain serial killers and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what they do with him. As you can see, he is spiraling. He was already a very mad man before, but now it's like even more so. And now Jim's got an even bigger target on his back. Jarvis was already coming after him before, because it's like, oh, you took Alice away from me, Jim broke his spell and everything, so I'm pretty sure that didn't make him happy. But even more so now, it's like, oh, he blames him for Alice dying. It's like, truth be told, you're the reason Alice died. She'd rather die than be with you, so. But like I said, we'll just have to wait till next week to kind of see where that all goes. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl, which, much like last week's episode, you see Kara and Clark just having so much fun, working together on everything, stopping that, putting that building out on fire. Just everyone's super happy. Then stopping that robbery. Like, Kara stops the car from the front. They try to reverse, and Clark stops it from behind. Guys get out and start shooting at him. And then the guy punches Clark and just kind of like hurts his hand. And then Clark's like, okay, you see that the bullets don't work, and then you try to hit me with your fist. What were you expecting to happen? He's like, why does everyone do that? I still don't get that. So that's kind of fun. And also we kind of still see kind of like the backlash between John and Clark. But we kind of got a little bit more of John's perspective on this. Like, I brought it up last episode. It's like, yeah, that's like basically his reasoning for doing it. It's like, granted, he had right reason to keep Kryptonite around because, Kryptonians did kind of go run rampant last season. But also because it's like, you never know what could happen in the future. And it's a good thing he was well prepared. Because because what he ended up bringing up to Clark is, I lost my entire family, my entire world. I am the last of my kind because God's ascended upon our planet and burned it. He's like, I'm not about to let that happen to another home of mine. So you kind of understand a little bit more about why, it makes even more sense of why he does what he does. Especially, but then you have Clark being like, the reason why I don't trust you is because you don't trust me. You can't offer, a helping hand with one hand and then hold kryptonite in the other one. It just doesn't work that way. But luckily by the end of the episode, it seemed like they did kind of come to a understanding. Clark did kind of take the remaining kryptonite that the DEO had. Granted, I guess it's because they don't really have to worry about any future issues because all the other Kryptonians were taken care of in what specific way, that was never necessarily explained. Whatever really happened, I'm sure they're just kind of like, I guess it kind of got cast off on planet. We still don't really know whatever happened to Non after the whole like awesome heat beam battle between him and Supergirl. So, but I guess I guess there's always the off chance that something could happen and they could always get controlled. We haven't seen it in Supergirl yet, but like I said, we kind of got introduced to it on Arrow. The fact is magic exists. So, Smallville taught me that magic can hurt the Man of Steel. So, that could easily be something that someone does. They manipulate Clark or Kara with magic in that way. So there'd be a moment where you'd want kryptonite to be around. But also, like I said, I don't know. Like, it seemed like I brought it up before, but I'm guessing Red Kryptonite really was just kind of a one-off episode thing. Because I think I remember hearing someone say the fact is different colored kryptonite isn't something canon to comic books. That's just something in the TV shows like this and Smallville. Smallville kind of like got many different versions of kryptonite that did different things. But I guess like that was just kind of a one-off thing. So, but I mean, it's a very interesting storyline because, like I said, because me watching like the first season of Supergirl came out around the same time like I had finished Smallville, so a lot of that stuff from Smallville was like fresher in my mind because I had recently finished it and everything. So I don't know, like that was just kind of an interesting callback, especially because that was so fresh in my mind. But nevertheless, moving on. It was also a very interesting episode for Kara, a very interesting episode for her because a lot of stuff is changing. For one, she's getting a new boss, Snapper Carr, who is a bit of a douchebag. I mean, granted, to be fair, he's kind of hard on her because, it's like, okay, you didn't get here the way other people do. You do it. You kind of got this job on a whim. You kind of had Kat kind of pull some strings for you. You didn't work your way here, which you could argue, yes, she did. She worked her butt off being Kat's assistant, and she proved herself to Kat, so she was able to get the position that she's in. But I get where he's coming from. I'm very protective when it comes to cars. I was just like, the entire time I was like, oh, this douchebag, who the hell does he think he is? And he just won't recognize her. And you had Kara going to Kat being like, no, you got to talk to him. You're the one that helped get me that position. And then Kat's like, you got to stand up on your own. I'm not going to be here forever to kind of look after you. I've told you before, you're a smart, hardworking, brave girl, and you need to kind of like believe me for once when I tell you that, and kind of show him what you're really capable of. I can see what you're capable of. You just can't see it yet. And so, I mean, and that's kind of another thing I want to talk about. I already knew it. It was already spoiled for me. What was it? I forgot whether it was like, it was definitely source-fed nerd related. I don't remember I don't think it was Superhero Roundup. I think it's like What You Missed, the new show that they're kind of starting about, the Easter eggs and, different shows. And they kind of brought up the whole Callista Flockhart thing, like leaving. I was like, oh, dude, that sucks. Because I knew the whole situation about the show, moving to CW not being kind of preferable for her. But the fact is that she was in the first episode. I was like, okay, I guess it all worked out. I was like, yay. But then I end up finding out she's leaving. I'm sure she has her own personal reasons, whether it's connected to like the reasons before, just kind of like she can't be in Vancouver the entire time filming this show. Nonetheless, it's sad because it's like, dude, I really like her as Kat, dude. She's so good. And it's just like the whole conversation with Kara just being like, Kara's like, I don't know if I can do this without. It's like, stop it. Because it's not just Kara tearing up, it's also Kat tearing up a little bit too. And I'm just like, I can't stand this. Cause the Kat's like, her conversation with Kara last episode about, diving in and kind of taking those new paths. It kind of spoke to her too. And she needs to take those new opportunities because she feels like she's kind of been circling the same waters. It's time to take a chance and try something new. So she's bringing up the fact that she's like, kind of making it seem like it's a temporary thing. Because my understanding, they're like, okay, it's going to be a couple episodes. I was thinking like, oh, she's going to leave in a couple episodes. And it's like, the way you're making it sound like she's leaving now. So maybe it's going to be a situation where she leaves, but she comes back later on in the season or something like that. Or maybe we do get a couple more episodes with her. I don't know. I would just have to wait till next week to find it. But that really bummed me out. I mean, it sucks for Kara because like life is changing so much around her. Because she got Clark back in her life for a little while, but he's deciding to leave now too. Then the whole breaking up with Jimmy thing. It's just a lot to kind of take in. It's just, it's because she felt so good, kind of on top of the world, had a new job, things were working out, she had a boyfriend, but now that's kind of all just kind of changing for her. Side note, an interesting thing about Jimmy is taking over Kat's job. He's kind of the temporary boss while she's away, so that's kind of interesting. That's going to be really interesting. And it seems like he's not holding a grudge against her about the whole, like, we breaking up thing. Us just going back to just being friends thing. I wouldn't be able to snap back like that, be having a casual conversation. I'd be too heartbroken, just because I kind of have been in that situation before. But this isn't about me. This is about Supergirl. Also, once again, source-fed nerds spoiling stuff for me. It's my own fault for watching it. If I want to go in blind, I need to stop watching everything. I should probably unsubscribe for the DC YouTube channel too, because I see that the same thing for that and Marvel too. I see stuff like that popping up in my subscription box. It's like I don't need to know about what's happening in the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or what's happening in the latest episode of my DC shows. Just let me go in blind. But nevertheless, from what they're showing that there's going to be basically what Source and Nerd said, there was some interesting thing that's going to happen to Jimmy this season. To anyone that hasn't seen it or whatever, doesn't care to know, don't worry about it. I won't spoil it because it's something even I'm not like. It's one of those DC things I'm not familiar with. It looks cool, but I don't know what that is. But not talking about that anymore. What I really also liked in this episode, like kind of here I am keep drawing comparisons to Batman v Superman, but it was kind of a similar situation of just kind of like Cadmus kind of rose out of the darkness. They kind of presented themselves as like, we're here, like our Earth is being invaded by these aliens, these freaks, you know. Basically, how, like, you know, with Batman v Superman, it's like these are gods walking amongst men. They destroyed an entire city, and it's like, you know, Cadmus is kind of trying to present that here as being like, they're not the heroes you think they are. You know, they're, you know, kind of bringing up, essentially comparing it, like being like, oh, if they wanted to, they could easily wipe us out. You know, don't treat them like heroes. And so Cadmus has kind of presented themselves like, because I really was curious, like, because I was just thinking Cadmus is a lab doing experiments for just shits and giggles, essentially. I'm sure they had their reasons, but I didn't expect it to be like, yeah, we're trying to get rid of Kryptonians. That's why they specifically made Metallo, which was pretty cool seeing him in this episode. I'm actually surprised I got it right who he was. Like I wasn't sure last episode. I heard the name and I was like, isn't that who, you know, insert who he was? And I was like, oh yeah, it is him. That was kind of interesting. But like, it was so badass seeing him fight. Because I was also wondering about that. I was like, oh, they just put kryptonite in him. Like, I was like, oh, I thought he was like half machine too. And then it burned away his hand and there's like machine parts. I was like, there it is. There it is. Thank you. Thank you. I was wondering about that, whether he was just human or not. It's like, no, he's part machine now too. And so that was really kick-ass seeing like all the different things. For one, like seeing everyone kind of team up. You had Alex in her suit with Kara versus Metallo, and then like, I mean, the other side note of the episode, the second Metallo, I was kind of hoping they would have made him into something else, but I mean, second Metallo is okay too. And you had John and Clark going up against him, so that was pretty badass. And you also had Wynn making those little devices to stop kryptonite from hurting him. My mind initially went to anyone that might be familiar with the Superman cartoon from the 90s, where the only way I can reference is like Tim Daly voiced Superman, Clark/Superman in the cartoon. Now, it was kind of my first experience with Superman. I mean, maybe the movies, but the cartoon series I remember a lot more vividly than the movies, because I don't actually remember when I actually saw the original Christopher Reeve Batman movie. I mean, Superman was, excuse me. Ugh. But in that, when he kind of went up against someone like Metallo, he had like a space suit. I don't know whether it was made of tin or what particular material it was made out of, but it looked kind of like a space suit. It was like dark gray. Like, I was kind of expecting Wynn to make something like that, but it turned out to be something small. Once again, it's probably, well, this is a TV show, there's a budget and everything, so they can't go full on like that, or just maybe, you know, it's like we need to go extra out of our way to do that. You know, the little shield served its purposes. I mean, it was just kind of one of those things, like, I thought it was going to go that direction, but it was like, nope, something small, but nonetheless. And I really loved Wynn this episode, kicking up fanboying to the next level, because he's presenting the devices and everything. He's like, so what do you think? And here, Hank was about to talk. He's like, oh yeah, they look. He's like, I wasn't asking you. And then Clark was like, he's like, they're amazing. Good job, Wynn. And he starts crying. And Kara's like, are you crying? And then Wynn's like, no, I'm not. Why would I be crying? And it's like, wow, Wynn. And especially when Clark was saying goodbye, Wynn actually went up and hugged him. That was incredible. But another thing kind of got presented in this episode that was kind of very interesting was Kara's decision that she was like, you know, she's like, oh, you know what? I can always leave. I can go live in Metropolis with Clark. And which Alex didn't appreciate that. She's like, wait, what? Are you kidding me? Shut up. Don't do that. Are you serious? So you're just going to up and abandon me? We're supposed to have each other's back. But you kind of get both sides of the argument. Her argument being like, well, if I'm away, there's less trouble here. Plus, me and Clark can have each other's backs. We're cousins. You know, it's like, you know, plus, you know, I can learn so much about him and from him. You know, we'd have each other's back and everything. I want to be around someone that really understands me, what it's like to live it, you know, as a Kryptonian and whatnot. So, but for Alex, it's like, I've protected you all of my life, protected your identity. That's been a huge part of my life. It's been protecting you. Do you not realize how much I've given up? I've given up on so much for you. Like, she was going to be, wasn't she, because they covered it in season 1 when you kind of got a bit of a flashback on Alex kind of being a bit of a party girl. I mean, that was kind of her way of compensating for like the whole huge responsibilities she had when it came to Kara. But she was studying to be a doctor or something. Well, I think that's kind of what she brought up this episode too. She even brings it up to Win too. He's like, do you realize how long it's been since I've dated? 2 years. You date more than I do. Kind of a jab at Win. But it's like, well, let's not forget who the last person it was that he was dated, at least that we know of. That was Siobhan, aka Banshee, and we see how that kind of worked out. His significant other turned into a metahuman supervillain. So, not kind of the best example to give. I mean, I get where you're coming from. But granted, we don't know. Maybe Wynn's had dates since then. But, from our knowledge of the show, it seems like that's kind of the only last dating he did. So it's kind of like you really shouldn't kind of use that as an example. So I just thought it was funny. But you also get Alex's position too. Like I said, she sacrificed so much for Kara. And, she even kind of throws a little shade. It never was kind of brought up again, but she was kind of like, yeah, you think, oh, he's going to understand you and be there for you. Let's not forget, he left you behind when you first came to this planet. He left you with my family. So it's like, will he really be there for you? It's like he abandoned you. And it's like, oh, that's such a harsh word to say. Now, kind of going off book a little bit, to anyone that might have seen Young Justice, it's kind of not too surprising seeing that side of Superman, because we saw him treat Superboy like that at first. Because I think wasn't it Bruce that had to sit down and talk to him about like, yo, you're treating Superboy like shit. What's your problem? It's like, he's a part of you. Yes, there's another part of him that's part alien, some other alien species, and he's kind of like your clone and whatnot, but he's still a part of you. She kind of look after him and whatnot. And it's like Clark was like, no, I'm not going to take responsibility for him. So it's kind of a similar situation, but at the same time, like I said, it was never delved into, but I like to think it's because Clark left Kara in Jeremiah and his family's hands because he saw what having an Earth family did for him. And he thought maybe the same thing could happen to Kara. It's like, it's not just being around another Kryptonian. It's like there's certain lessons that she can only learn from Earth people, that, certain values that she can only get bestowed upon because of his upbringing and her upbringing. And that's kind of how I think that ended up kind of, that's how I like to rationalize it. I mean, luckily by the time the episode ended, it seems like they're on good terms again. They kind of apologize and everything for acting the way they did. I mean, truth be told, it's just they don't want to give each other up. Like, because Wynn brought up a very good point. He's like, I'm from a foster family. And, they always make you feel like, oh, you should be grateful for being where you are right now. It's like, we didn't have to take you in. We don't have to take care of you. You should be grateful for this opportunity. It's like, no, family shouldn't be about keeping score. It's about just being there when someone needs them. So, which was very surprising when that Cadmus lady was like offering Alex a position. He's like, oh, do you realize how your life would be if aliens had never come here and whatnot? Which, Alex kind of was thinking about that earlier in the episode, but it was kind of like, obviously, Cadmus doesn't know this, but it's like, Kara's her sister. Like, she might have problems with everything, changes in Kara's life, making her want to change certain things. I mean, she's kind of decided against it, but it's still, she would never do anything to harm Kara because she loves Kara, just like Kara loves her. They will always have each other's backs. They're like, they're very important to one another. Like, Kara wouldn't be where she is without Alex. So, there was another thing that I kind of got an answer to about the other dude. The dude that's, a Kryptonian, quote unquote, who he really is and whatnot. Once again, another source-fed spoiler. They didn't really go into too much detail, but apparently he's an alien species that has a similar physiology to a Kryptonian. So, and apparently him and his people have a very interesting history with the Kryptonians, which, I mean, I'm glad, like I said, I do appreciate this. I'm joking, I'm sitting here bitching and complaining like, oh, they spoil certain things. I'm fascinated by it because it's like, I would never know this stuff if it wasn't for SourceFed Nerd, because they inform me. That's why I appreciate stuff like what they're doing now with the What You Missed, as well as like Superhero Roundup. It gives me information on stuff I had no idea about because I'm not that informed in comic books. Not that I hate comic books or anything, I've never gone out to read them. And it's like, they pull from different bits of DC knowledge all over the board, so it's kind of like it's hard to really pinpoint. It's like, oh yeah, I'll read some Green Arrow comic books and know everything there is to know about all four of the DC shows that I'm currently watching. It doesn't work like that. I'd have to definitely do some heavy ass homework. I mean, granted, I could always do the shitty thing and just go Wikipedia, which I do on certain things. Just because I'm curious about certain characters' backgrounds, whether they're comic book related. Because, there's certain characters you're like, I wonder if they need a comic book or not. Like the whole thing about the current girl who's the Canary, like Black Canary, like she's apparently taught. I don't know if the show's going to aim to make her into, like, whether essentially get Artemis. Never mind. I'm stopping there because this isn't Arrow. This is Supergirl. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Yes, it's all DC and it's all connected, but I'm going to leave it at that. Anyway, just all over the place. Just a very nice episode. Like I said, a little bum we won't be seeing Superman again. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll pop up a little bit later on in the season, but nevertheless, I'm very interested to see where Kara will go now with these new changes. She was able to convince Snapper is like, oh yeah, she gave him the report and everything that she had written and everything. It's just like, God, you're awful, you suck. Just come back tomorrow and I can possibly do something, make you into a decent writer, a decent reporter. And she's like, yes. Does this mean I get a chair? No. And so it's like, okay, kind of a step forward. It's a small step, but it's definitely a small step forward. Like I said, it's kind of interesting, like, even her, because you have to also look at her relationship with Kat. Her and Kat didn't get along always. Kat kind of, on occasion you could argue Kat kind of treated her like shit, but it's like Kat only treated her that way because she knew Kara's potential, or at least that's what Kat would like us to think. So, side note also, since I'm talking about Kat, I love it we get it a little bit again this episode, just Kat just drooling over Clark, just feeling like, God, Clark can't, just seeing him walk away, and you just see Kara just they're disgusted. I mean, because she hasn't let loose. She can't really be like, yeah, me and Clark were cousins. I mean, it's already, also that relationship is kind of explained about Supergirl and Clark and just that whole thing. But you just see her just kind of disgusted. Yeah, it's like, if you say so, stop talking about my cousin like that. This is weird, especially because she used to change his diaper and everything. Or her used to at one point in time was older than him and everything. So it's just, I don't know. It's like, come on, Kat. Clark is more than just a piece of meat. And that was kind of another thing, since I am talking about Kat, we kind of got to see Kat and Kara have their goodbye, but we also got to see Kat having her goodbye with Supergirl, being like, I love it. She's like, did I ever tell you that my full name is, what'd she say, Catherine? And she's like, I'm not telling you and Kara's like, I'm not telling you my real name. And she's like, she's like, I'm sorry, just, that journalist in me still trying to kind of creep out a little bit. And it's just like, because she helped, it's not just Kara that Kat helped. She helped her a lot as Supergirl too. She helped make her into the superhero that she is, give her confidence. So it's like, has to, Supergirl has to say her goodbyes too, but, hopefully Kat will come back. And it's like, Supergirl's telling her too. It's like, Kat's easily become a friend and she, wants her to stay safe and come back, someday. So very nice. And like I said, just the whole Callista Flockhart thing, just, it bums me out a little bit. I mean, like I said, I know she has her reasons and everything, which, side note, I don't know why it never clicked in my head. Happened to, just Googling her real quickly and whatnot, because I never did before because I'm an idiot. Did not realize she was Ally McBeal from Ally McBeal until I was like, I saw her as like, it's like, oh yeah, and people know her from Ally McBeal. I was like, don't tell me she played Ally McBeal on Ally McBeal. And I was like, yeah, she did. I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Because I don't know, like, it just never clicked in my head. Nevertheless. Very interesting episode. I'm very curious to see where we go next time. And finally, moving on to this week's episode of Lucifer. Big theme of this episode is distractions. Lucifer's trying to distract himself with the whole situation with his mom. I mean, really, it's the whole, well, not just his mom per se, but just the entire situation. The whole promise he made to God about, returning her to hell and everything. He also had Chloe dealing with the divorce, trying to find out where she goes from here in life and everything. And, you have Lucifer trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be there for her. It's like, you need to have a little fun. You're too wound up about everything. So have a little fun. Gets Maze to kind of take her out for drinking. So obviously, Chloe's just kind of diving into work, but kind of uses it, work as an excuse to kind of take her to the bar. Or she ends up, Ella tags along and they end up running into Linda too. So that was it turned into a little thing, and I really appreciate that. Because we also found out some interesting things, like for one, Dr. Martin used to be a phone sex operator, which that's interesting. Ella used to steal cars. You had May throwing in her a little bit of her origin story. It's like, yeah, I was forged in the bowels of hell, and everyone's just like, okay. And then you had Chloe kind of opening up about what's happening with her and Dan, just like the divorce and not knowing where to go, being that means kind of existing as kind of a single parent now. And it's just interesting seeing them get all drunk and everything, and just kind of like, oh, we're a tribe together now. It's like, oh, it's so cute. And when the whole situation played out, when that lady kind of threatened Chloe and just like, oh, stay away from my man, you skank. And then May stepped up and was like, whoa. No one calls my skank a skank but me. And just got crap started. I mean, especially like Linda kind of gets stuff like, oh, no, she's just kind of like dealing with her own insecurities and just being this lady's just being an outright bitch. And I was like, wow, Dr. Martin. And it turned into a little brawl. May's kind of breaking a pool stick and just kicking ass, like always. You see Chloe kind of getting into it, kind of putting some people in the choke lock and everything. Just all around a fantastic night. I'm sure Chloe disagrees, especially at the end of the episode when she finds out in her drunken state, her and Maze decided to become roomies. It's like her and Trixie, well, more specifically her. I'm sure Trixie's going to be living there from time to time. I guess at the same time she'll be, bouncing back between Dan's place, his and Chloe's old place and their new place. Because it's, Maze is kind of like, well, I kind of like your kid and you're all right. You're kind of proving yourself to be a little bit fun, so moving in with you is fine and everything. Chloe's just kind of like, oh. I mean, it doesn't sit well with Lucifer because it's like the two women in my life kind of conspiring against me. This presents an opportunity for that, and it's like it'll give y'all an advantage against me, and I don't like that. But like I said, I get where Chloe's kind of upset because it's like she actually did legitimately go out and had a fun time, but just to find out the whole thing was a bet just kind of ruined it a little bit. It's like, oh, you were just, playing with my emotions, essentially. You were just, this is all kind of a play. Lucifer kind of has good meaning behind what he was doing. He was legitimately trying to help her out, but he kind of turned it into a little bit of fun for himself. He even, making a bet with Maze and everything. What I found very interesting was what Maze said she wanted at the end of it all. She was like, initially she was saying like one of the cars, but he's like, fine, you can have one of the cars. And she's like, I want a drink. And he's like, okay, get whatever drink you want. She's like, no, I want you to pour it. And she had Lucifer pouring it. And he's like, oh, here's to new power positions. Because that's what I kind of represented, that him pouring the cup for her, because she's always been in servitude to Lucifer. And now it's kind of like, this is kind of a metaphor for them standing on equal footing, no longer just being like, kind of like a Hellmaster and demon servant, just being like equal footing, like because for the longest time she's always been bound to Lucifer. Because even Chloe kind of threw that in Maze's face and she kind of got upset about it. It's like, you're always there, you probably act like you have such a problem with Lucifer, yet you're still at Lux, you're still doing whatever he asks you to. So I guess this is her taking the steps to go go down her own path without kind of being once again, finding her own way without her way being dictated by, Lucifer's path. I did like at the beginning of the episode, she was there kind of to mess with Lucifer's mom, because you see her trying to take place as Charlotte. She's not having as much fun with it. She's like, the kids they're just and at the same time, she's like, humans just don't know when to shut up. They just want to keep talking. And she's like, most of the time, she's able to keep the husband quiet just by pure sex. So that's kind of interesting. Maze even comments like, yeah, it took me a while to learn that, you can shut most humans up with sex. So, but, it's kind of interesting because I don't think she really understands what she's doing. Like, Charlotte, Lucifer's mom pretending to be Charlotte, like, it's kind of her showing that, hey, I'm good enough at being a parent to these disgusting humans. I can be a parent to Lucifer and Amenadal. But I don't think she really sees it as that. She just sees it as just kind of an annoying thing she has to do to prove her loyalty to Lucifer. Which, I don't know, like I said, she's playing the part, but, it's all for the sake of drawing Lucifer into some false sense of security. Like I said, we saw at the end of the episode, she did kill someone and she had that kind of evil smirk on her face. Like I said, that could be interpreted many different ways, but another side of this episode, I mean, I'm kind of completely forgetting about the case almost. That's kind of sad. But this week's case dealt with two roommates. Well, actually, three people. They're all originally from Nebraska, and they came here. Basically, two girls ended up getting poisoned. It turns out that they were connected to what ended up being a sex club. That, interestingly enough, Dan, Lucifer, and Metallo kind of went to investigate. Dan constantly being like, yo, I don't look like a cop. It's like, okay. He's like, why did you run? Yeah, I mean, I saw you look like a cop, and I had to run. It's just like Lucifer's laughing about finding that hilarious. Not always the best looking like a cop when you're supposed to be kind of doing some undercover investigation. But nevertheless, ended up finding out that the girls that died, it's not like they were there willingly because they didn't realize it was a sex club. Turns out the person that killed them was the third girl from Nebraska. Her name was Lily. She's kind of like, oh, I haven't seen them in a week, and I'm so shocked. It's like, oh no, I came in here and found out that one of the girls is dead. It's like, no, she killed them all because back home she was somebody. She was supposed to come out here and become somebody. Become even more of a somebody. She's like, oh, I'm going to be a great actress and whatnot, but it's like, no. Kind of came here and you flopped. It's like I gave those girls everything. I gave them an opportunity, and I was supposed to be somebody. So it didn't work out for her. So she kind of took it out on them, like especially when they kind of went and play ball. I guess with her whole situation, just kind of selling themselves. What I found very fascinating was the way Chloe was kind of beating the crap out of her. Like afterwards, she's like, "Oh, the fact is, they were supposed to be your friends. You betrayed them. You used them." And it's just kind of like, "Wow, Chloe." I was expecting Lucifer to kind of say something, but he just kind of backed out. I was like, "Okay." I really like the whole conversation between Amenadal and Dr. Martin because he's like, there's some things going on, and he's just like some physical stuff, and she's like, "Oh, get it out your mind, and eventually you find out that you're, give yourself some time, and do you find out everything's A-okay?" And she kind of looks down, and Amenadal kind of looks down, realizing what she's talking about. He's just like, oh, I don't know why I even bother talking to you. Just like you're not understanding me, because he knows he can't really tell her the truth because it's not like she'll really listen. But interestingly enough, it was interesting at the sex club seeing Amenadal kind of cutting loose a little bit, just kind of getting drunk and having a fun time. Because you never get to see that side of him like that. Just as much as if it was a girl's night out, it was kind of a guy's night out. At first I was like, oh, bro's night out, but then Dan came along, so it turned to just plain guy's night out. So that was kind of cool. But it also presented an interesting thing in this episode where Amenadal was like, okay, you spent his entire time running away from your issues. Even I try to do it. He still hasn't let anyone know about his whole situation. The fact is, but he's like, you realize that there will be consequences. The fact is, you haven't taken mom back to hell like you promised dad. And does dad seem like the type of person that is okay with loopholes? It's like, if dad doesn't get his way, who's to say he won't just kind of screw you over? It's like, what did you promise him in return for mom? And Lucifer said, Chloe's life. And he's like, do you not think that dad will renege on your deal in the moment he finds out you're not keeping up your end of the bargains? Who's to say he won't that he will keep up his? He might just take Chloe's life. He's like, but there's no way dad would be so vengeful as to just go after one mortal life. But at the end of the episode, we see Chloe kind of gets into a car accident. Because I was wondering what was the consequence, because, Amenadal had brought that up earlier in the episode, and was like, what would be the consequences? He was basically saying it wouldn't be just Lucifer who suffers them, it'd be all of them. That it will basically be something that comes back to bite them all in the ass. Now, I didn't watch too much of the preview. I saw literally a second of it, and I saw a dude walking up, and I can assume it's Lucifer, we saw him from behind, and the guy was like, hello, brother. That was all I tried to turn the channel as fast as I could, because I always try to check to see if there's because usually you kind of have to sit through the previews before you actually see when's the next episode, whether it is next week, because stuff like this could always be like, oh yeah, there's actually no episode next week, might be going on a 2 or 3 week, break or whatever. Nevertheless, so the guy said brother, so I'm like, okay, so there's another angel here on Earth. Interesting, because I brought that up. I was wondering if we were going to get more of his siblings. Especially, things are going to be especially interesting when mom pops up and finds out, oh, even more of your brothers are here. Oh, how many more of my children are here on Earth? It's like, I wonder how many more will we see this season. I mean, especially because currently the only person that knows about Lucifer's weakness around Chloe is Amenadal. And that's also another thing, too, is like Chloe seems special because the fact is that she's able to do that. And it's not to anyone else, only to Lucifer. Like, Amenadal never lost his powers around Chloe. I mean, it seems like he's losing his powers for a completely different reason. I mean, to him, he's thinking he's being punished for, like, you know, not letting Lucifer go, not taking Lucifer back to hell like you're supposed to, the whole situation with their mom. Like, it's, you know, technically his fault for her escaping because Lucifer was here on Earth, but, you know, Amenadal was kind of supposed to be taking responsibility while Lucifer was here on Earth kind of maintaining things. So he was supposed to kind of balance the two, but he kind of got so caught up in his vendetta to kind of bring Lucifer back to hell that he kind of lost sight of things and ended up, you know, his mom ended up escaping because of that. So, but I am very curious to see who this brother is that we see next episode. And what this whole situation, like how this whole situation is going to play. Like I said, that was like I saw like a second of next time's episode. So I'm very curious to see what kind of condition Chloe's in, what this is going to mean for Lucifer, because Lucifer is going to blame himself. I mean, whether is it his fault? Kind of, yeah, but it's like you don't know whether it was just kind of an accident, or whether like God had a hand in it, kind of, you know, possibility trying to kill Chloe. I don't know. We just have to see next time, because it's like I was bringing up earlier, like she is special, so it's like, would he outright kill her or try and take her soul? Like, because she's in Lucifer's life for a reason, because he was always thinking like she was put in his life maybe by God or something, kind of to some kind of teach him some kind of lesson, which it does seem like he's slowly learning a lesson, and maybe that's what this is all about. Like I said, I'm very curious to know what everything is. Like, what's the truth behind the whole situation with Lucifer's mom? What does she really want? Like I said, my still go-to answer to that is power. She has, all this has to be for power, and she needs someone powerful on her side, so that's why she's trying to sway specifically her son. I'm about to say sons, but I don't know if she's really trying to get, it seems like she might be trying to get Amenadal on her side, whether that's just trying to get him on her side in regards of like, hey, getting him out of the way because he might be an obstacle. It seems like the one person she's really trying to get on her side is Lucifer, because I guess she feels because out of anyone, he'll be the easiest to sway to do whatever she was trying to do, him being the rebellious son, kind of going his own way and everything. So, a very nice episode. I'm just very curious to see where everything goes next week. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.